Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be breaking down everything new in the latest epicseven 7th update live stream. And as a quick disclaimer, I've already uploaded my thoughts and feelings on Genesis Raz as he was released earlier at the start of today's live stream. But with this, I'll now be talking about everything else that was shown, as there's actually an insane amount that they actually demonstrated or that they teased coming ahead. Without further ado though, let's break down everything new coming to epicseven. Now, again, to start us off, yes, we of course have seen Raz and his animation and all of his stories, his artifacts, everything fantastic, cool. However, to add to this, we also were showcased a bit of the new Mercedes, specifically, I guess she's being called Lady of the Scale. However, the actual showcase and kit preview for her is going to be on the 20th. And as a result, in terms of actually previewing or talking about her kit, we'll wait until it's actually been shown, or I guess broadcasted or illustrated through some other means. With that though, she does look pretty cool, and honestly, in terms of the story or the design that they had with her, all of this is pretty fantastic. I'm a big fan. Now, to add to this, they've also announced that there are some big changes coming. The first of which is actually a preset Redux type system. Now, to be clear, what they've described, and as you're seeing on screen, is that although they were considering just giving us loadouts, they believed that, giving us loadouts in the typical sense that you might imagine from other gacha games is not actually satisfactory, and as a result, they're giving us something called the revert equipment change feature. And with it, what we're actually being given is a system where you can put back your gear the way that it was before, specifically. Now, in addition to this, they're also making unequipped completely free, which is actually amazing considering how much gold you can actually spend, especially if you're competing for things like Hall of Trials. However, in case you're curious about date, the free unequipped should be beginning on the 28th of August. However, I'm not exactly sure when the equipment preset is going to be announced, as they were a bit jumbled and all over the place with some of this. Now, to add to this, they've also announced that there's going to be an analyzer for gear, which I cannot find the exact screenshot for. I apologize. I think it's right here. And with this, actually, it is a new feature that'll analyze and recommend you pieces of gear to equip to your characters. However, it also will analyze how good the gear that you have is, and then recommend what pieces you should remove. Now, to add to this, after you enhance a piece of gear, it'll also show you who the piece of gear that you just enhanced or you just made will be good for. And obviously, this is pretty nice in terms of management. Now, both of these features, as they described, will be available by the end of the year. However, they also announced that they're getting rid of the original team formation system that you're seeing here, and rather, each piece of content will now have their own dedicated team slots. However, there will also be a refund of Skystones for those who chose to expand the team formation by purchasing or expanding your slots with Skystones. Now, to add to this as well, they also announced that the altar, apologies, the spirit altar will now always be open starting on the 28th, which is huge. But then they decided to just shift gears a little bit more in terms of the future direction. And they've kind of talked about, I guess, a few of the things that were mentioned on some surveys or some feedback that was given from the community. A few key notes that they mentioned here is that epicseven is obviously designed to be a game that requires a lot of investment. Gear grinding is the current most popular, I guess, feature, or one of the most common trends or reasons for why people play the game. However, in more broad sense, gacha games, shorter content is more popular. And despite this, they also brought up some statistics, notably that 22% of players have said that there's too much to do in epicseven, while 20% have said that there is nothing to do in PvE, and they want more, which obviously conflicts with each other. Now, the reason why they're bringing this up is because they are basically trying to reduce fatigue, and they also want to reduce repetitive chores. However, with this, they're actually going to introduce new systems when it comes to, or I guess a new direction when it comes to introducing new content. Now, the first thing that they're introducing is a new equipment set, which is something that a lot of people have been asking for in terms of, I guess, their surveys. Now, to specifically talk about what they're introducing, the first set that they're introducing is the reversal set. The reversal set is a 4-piece set that increases speed by 15%, and when reviving, it'll increase your combat readiness push by 50%. And obviously, this is dedicated specifically for holy sack characters or characters that are more susceptible, obviously, to reviving. Now, to add to this, they also introduced a new set. there's a new set right here that you're seeing that is specifically designed for the evasion characters in the game, and that's called the riposte set. Now, this 4-piece riposte set has a 70% chance to allow you to counterattack when evading, and obviously these two characters on screen are some of the most common and most popular when it comes to evading. And overall, again, this is just a more creative or more interesting feature that they're adding to the game. Now, beyond all this, you may think to yourself, oh, well, nothing has changed. However, at least according to what they've mentioned here, they are planning on adding more sets in the future. However, now, while the introduction of these sets and the fact that they'll be adding more sets in the future is interesting, this doesn't really tie much into the whole fatigue thing that we just mentioned earlier and the future direction of the game. However, or rather I should say, except that this new set, or these two new sets, actually won't be obtained from the normal typical hunts, and rather what we have now is something called an Overworld Breach. This is a new piece of content that has a separate currency called spectral cores. Spectral cores can be exchanged for 160 energy up to 3 times a day, from what I understand. But beyond this, you can also exchange 2 leaves for this for unlimited exchanges. And just in case you're curious or need the outline for what this content is, it is an extremely high energy consuming piece of content. And with this, the equipment rate for content specifically, or whenever you do this content, is about as 3 times efficient as Hunt or Rift, meaning that although you are consuming a lot of energy, you are also getting a lot of equipment in return. Now, notably with this content as well, Epic equipment will have the same regular Epic gear drops that they have normally. However, the difference is that the enhancements or your upgrades for these pieces will only rather stick in the higher range, but notably it won't have higher stats than existing gear. The main difference here is that the gear just can't low roll. Now, this will obviously be huge for number 1, speed, obviously, but also for tankier or higher damage statistics and things of this nature. But to add to this, they're actually going to add this Otherworld difficulty to hunts as well, which will also still require spectral cores, but now you won't have crafting materials or other currencies drop from this. But the main appeal to having obviously these spectral cores or the Otherworld difficulty for this content is that you'll actually have twice as high drop rates for equipment if you perform, or if you end up fighting this difficulty of content, which is huge. And overall, just in terms of, I guess, the content that isn't even the Otherworld content, they're also increasing the currency, or I believe or rather I should say, they're increasing the drop rate for equipment in these hunts or in these fights by 15%. And this, because of the drastic changes, will be coming on September 11th. Now, after the E7 World Championship Finals on the 6th, they, I guess, will also be introducing some other features, or some other, I guess, like content will also be introduced at this time. They also mentioned, however, that the overall idea behind this is that your odds of getting bad rolls is supposed to be lower. However, they're also adding some other features, like the fact that they're expanding the inventory to now be a total of 900, and they've also increased things like the maximum energy at 70 to 360, which obviously is long overdue, because I mean, literally, what gacha game makes sense, or the current system, I should say, for epicseven just doesn't really make sense when you compare it to other gachas, just because, you know, most gachas will give you enough energy where you wake up in the morning, then you can expend all of it and then go to sleep, and it feels like you're rewarded more for spending your time efficiently, or waking up, or having a more cyclical like schedule. That's not really the case though for epicseven, as we have a really weird normal energy count. But to combat a lot of the fears that you may have about the new gearing or the new I guess equipment systems that they've been adding, they'll also be running charm effects or gold dungeons more frequently. Now, you might be wondering what I'm talking about, or what the man on the stream right now is saying when it comes to the extra effects like increased barrier strength. And originally, or rather I should say what this is referring to, is that originally when they showed off gear in the past, they had, I guess, 78 gear that specifically had special effects on them, and it was a bit of a controversy in the community. Now, to be clear, they have no plans to add this gear, and they just wanted to be transparent and clarify, which again, I can always appreciate. More communication can't hurt. However, they're also kind of, I guess on the topic of being more communicative, they do want to kind of talk more about Labyrinth and why they removed Hellraid. And to be honest, although I wasn't super sold by what they said here, what they explained was that the intention behind removing Labyrinth was so that you could auto a boss fight instead of a full route. However, obviously the content that they replaced it with was just too hard, and the perdition level specifically will now be reworked so that it'll, I guess, be more rewarding, and they've also made a number of changes already, but they do plan on changing things in the future, like things, I guess, like reducing the cost for, or I think it's already in the game, or reducing the Skystone cost for resetting hero costs, and overall, like this system, or the, I guess, the Labyrinth system, they just wanted to be more communicative about, as honestly, removing something like that, which a lot of people have done for a long time in the past, did obviously hurt a lot of players more than they'd expected. Now, they also did want to mention that in terms of... Ooh, where is this? Not to spoil too much. They did also want to talk about actually the Goblomu, here it is, the Goblomu's treasure storage, and the fact that although the old Goblomu treasure storage was nerfed when it was turned into Ogre's Armory, they're planning on buffing the current system of the Ogre's Armory since new equipment is being introduced. But you might have just seen that I accidentally skipped into it. Yes, they actually did mention 15% and the absolute resistance in this game. And I'm sorry, guys, there are currently no plans to remove 15% in PvP. However, they are actually planning on trying to ease or remove some of the RNG factors that it causes in PvE. And again, TLDR is that it's not being removed, but it's going to be worked around or accounted for, which I guess is kind of like a band-aid system, but I also don't really get why it's not being more readily addressed or adjusted in the future. If they're, again, going to go out of their way to kind of work around it anyways, or make band-aids on it, it's kind of weird for me. Now, to, I guess, to add to this, as you're seeing in the background here, there are a lot of different things that are being shown on screen. Through September and December, this is like, I guess, basically the full timeline of events or activities that are going to be coming. They have the Phantasmal Barrier, the Guild War tournaments, Monolith with a Monolith Showdown, which is a PvE or a new PvE mode. And then after December, following the 6th World episode, they'll introduce a new episode. And as they actually mentioned earlier, and you might see in a little bit behind here, there's something of a symphony, which we'll talk about later. Now, they then shifted gears and they moved to a developer-based Q&A with the actual, I guess, balance and developers of epicseven. And this was, I guess, interviewed or hosted by Kwang Jun. I apologize, I'm definitely butchering his name, but another epicseven creator. Now, I will be clear, or I do want to say, like, just straight off the bat, a lot of people are skeptical about whether or not these developers or I guess anyone working on the game actually plays the game at all. However, it is worth mentioning that something that they stated here from Kayron, or the developer end right here, is that this isn't actually his first time seeing this other creator, and the reason for this and what they describe is that Kayron here has been floating presumably around Warlord, Emperor, or has even touched Legend. Don't exactly know what it is, and obviously we don't know what his IGN is or anything like that, but just to basically insinuate or to explain that he does kind of feel or is a bit more familiar with the game itself. Now, they explained a few things when it came to balance, and the first thing that they basically talked about was that obviously when it comes to balance, they prioritize buffing lower used units, and of course they want to make every character as usable as possible, or have them at least have some sort of, I guess, avenue that they can be used in, or some piece of content that they're useful in. Now, when it came to Fenris's EE, they said that they recognized that Harsetti was annoying for especially defense in arena. However, because Harsetti's skill set was very versatile, they tried to, instead of making a super broad team, they decided to just try to counter with one specific character, which they didn't realize the unintended negative effect of, which is that if you don't have Fenris, you're kind of out of luck. But I do want to say that though it's not necessarily the greatest idea to do something like this, at least their head was in the right direction, as they did acknowledge that obviously like Harsetti is a problem. Now, they did also go on to say things like the fact that or basically, like, I guess, explain that they are planning on doing things like nerfs if the community is going to be, or if the community comes to a consensus. However, as a rule, they try to avoid nerfs as much as possible. And then they basically started talking about specifically the ban pick and the balance patches. But before we even get to the ban pick system specifically, they did actually go out of their way to say that balance patches and the feedback towards balance patches wanting to be more frequent, or people wanting there to be more characters on the balance patch, is a bit difficult, I guess, on their end, because they said that if they make balance patches too, I guess, too frequent, they'll feel less impactful. And then if you have too many characters, sometimes it'll feel like the quality of the patch is really low. And although you may disagree or agree with the sentiment, that is the explanation that they gave for this specifically. Now, in regard to the ban protection system, effectively what they're trying to, or what the purpose of this ban protection system was that they wanted to basically balance first and second turn, as again, like, you know, if you get to ban someone's like last pick, or if you are first or second pick, that obviously drastically affects like your game plan and also your success rate, depending on what you have first. A lot of gibberish and a lot of like blabbering later. Effectively, what they wanted to say is that the whole purpose of ban protection was to, again, make the game more balanced, which, again, if anyone were thinking or predicting that this is supposed to be something to make the game more fun, that is definitely not the way that they presented this. Now, on that topic, though, they also wanted to talk about balancing characters, and more specifically, like their intent behind buffing certain characters. And at least from what they've announced or what they've mentioned here, is that they only really buff a character if they feel like they fit the purpose at the time. If it feels like a character who is popular has received an EE that isn't deserved. And more specifically, what they mean by this is that for the ML Shu EE, for instance, people were curious why that character and Infinite Horizon Acades got EEs, while other characters are absolutely drowning at the bottom of the lake. However, what they've said is that they are obviously planning on trying to buff these lower played characters. However, if a kit or an EE, or if a purpose for a new character fits the mold, they're just going to do it. It doesn't matter if they're popular or unpopular. Now, beyond this, they've also announced a new system. They've announced a new system that you're seeing on screen right now, and this is the warfare rules. And this is one of, I guess, one of the newer things that they've added, and it's one of, or it's basically an addition of one of several preset rules that'll be randomly applied prior to a match starting. And this is going to basically change the game in a similar way as it did with Battle Frenzy in the past. And the idea behind this is that it'll give an advantage to players who can adapt on the fly and keep things interesting. And again, this, as opposed to things like the ban protection or even Battle Frenzy, is what's specifically trying, or specifically supposed to keep the game interesting. So this is more interesting, or I guess more appealing to players if you feel like the game or the content as of late has been dry. And personally, I have to see exactly what the rules are. I think making a game super unbalanced is honestly the wrong way to take things. However, as I'm sure you guys have seen in games like League of Legends and other content like that, or of the sort, having things like the Fearless Draft or Iron Man modes where the content or the typical drafting paradigm or gameplay gets changed up a bit is always worth trying, just because, again, it is an interesting or less dry and stale gameplay mode as opposed to what we've already had. Now, then we move to the operations, or part 2 of the stream, where we talked more about the operations and events. So first and foremost, they apologized that there wasn't enough communication, and then they were then asked about things like new modes, including things like or similar events to, I guess, like the Epic Dash event. With this, they announced a Super Kick event, and honestly, the Super Kick event looks pretty cool. What they specifically mentioned with the Super Kick, though, is that you'll get an Unknown Slate, a bottle, Hero Element Summon tickets, 900 Twin Librarian medals, and 6,000 energy. And the Super Cake event, as far as I can tell, is just something that you'll do as a server-wide sort of mission and complete. However, at the very end of this, and one of the coolest things that they announced with this event, where is it? Okay, well, I can't find it, but you probably saw a little bit of it. Oh, here it is. It's that if you clear the final mission of this activity, you'll actually claim a Boss Moonlight 5-star selector, which is obviously huge because that gives you access to characters like Zio, Bellion, Archdemon Mercedes, Strays, to name a few. Now, beyond this, they did also acknowledge the fact that there was a shortage of Molagoras, and honestly, if you are a long-term player, it does feel maybe a bit easier on you if you're not necessarily in a bad spot when it comes to upgrading or building more characters. And with, to be fair, the new systems where you now have technically more characters, or I guess like sample pre-built characters in RTA, things might not feel the worst in terms of Molagora in some cases. However, overall, there are still many Molagora shortages, and they plan to improve rewards or give more Molagoras, though they can't, I guess from their description, specifically just hand out like thousands of Molagoras for free, or like remove the Molagora system entirely, which is fine, I guess, if they want to make money. Now, they did also mention that the coin shop is going to be changed, so now it's more flexible, and it will now allow you to, I guess, allow for the acquisition of old characters, and it's more selective-y as opposed to the randomness that we have right now. And beyond this, they then specifically mentioned the Azaran poll, or the Azaran popularity poll, and as of right now, the top most popular, or the most popular characters currently are New Moon Luna, Boss Arunca, and Bystander Hua. And if you didn't know, again, the top voted character here gets a skin, and at least from what I understand, this skin will be given to all players for free, which is obviously huge. Now, we then move to more of the esports side, and again, 2026 is supposed to be more improved E7 World Champion, or let me repeat myself. 2026's plan is to improve the E7 World Championship and the esports that surround it. However, in addition to this, they're actually trying to make some second tier online tournaments leading up to the E7 World Championship, which is cool. But then they also announced an orchestra event, which is pretty crazy, and there's 31 tracks, special illustrations, and merchandise if you go. This event will also be broadcasted or presented online as well, and if you end up participating or visiting, or I guess either visiting or watching the orchestra online, you have different rewards or separate rewards that you can receive. Obviously, if you're at the concert itself, you'll get something like a profile card and I think some stickers. However, if you just go online, or even if you just visit or watch the stream online, you'll actually get a special coupon for a level 88 special or a level 88 baton special in-game item, which of course we don't know the stats of right now, but is pretty cool. Now, aside from other collabs and some other, or rather I should say some other IRL collabs, like again, like Marts and stuff, they did unfortunately kind of maybe have the worst, most uncomfortable scene that I've ever seen, which is they teased, or they mentioned, where's the collab? Why no collab? How come we're not talking about the collab this long into the video? And I'll just let the clip play out.
네, 저희 콜라보 당연히 중요하게 생각하고 있고요. 준비하고 있으니까 적절한 때가 되면 여러분께 공개해드리도록 하겠습니다. 뭔가 오늘은 더 이상 말씀을 못 하시는 것 같은데 여러분 조금만 더.
Yeah, if that didn't make sense, or if you couldn't tell, basically we're getting kind of edged again when it comes to the collab. Again, I will say the last collab was interesting, the Overlord collab, regardless if you think it was successful or not with the characters or or I guess the selection. I do think Overlord was pretty cool, and even though, or regardless if you found that the characters were cringe, good, bad, whatever, it was definitely something different, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a collab that people had been asking for a long time, so I'm interested in what we have in the future, but admittedly, it was also a pretty long time ago. Now, they did also finally announce something at the very end, which I believe was some rewards, which is absolutely crazy. And as you see on screen right now, these are this is the coupon that you can use to, I guess, redeem all this. But I do want to make a disclaimer that when you go to redeem this, and I'll explain exactly what the rewards are, because you might be curious about what's on screen. When you go to redeem this coupon, just know that specifically for this coupon, you have to redeem it, but not just redeem it, you have to activate or put this code into whatever, I guess, like coupon entering website or method that you choose. But then you have to go out of your way to specifically activate and use the coupon after you've redeemed the coupon, just as a heads up. Now, with what you're seeing right now, you might be curious as to what the exact rewards are. And as you could probably guess, yes, we are getting 100 Molagoras. We're getting 77 of these gold transmit stones for inevitably the imprints for Mercedes, who I assume is going to be the boss character. To add to this, we are also being given a Moonlight 5-star ticket, which is huge. And by the way, you can get this right now, like literally right now. But no, you're not dreaming. They're actually giving us a 20 speed set HP main stat neck. That by itself, to be honest, is already pretty crazy for a lot of players. If you haven't already experienced what the RTA or the endgame PvP in this game is like, yes, you will need speed, and honestly, HP percent especially is helpful for characters like, characters like a ROM, characters like New Moon Luna, characters like ML Politis. Literally any opener that you can think of right now probably appreciates or would ideally want an HP percent main stat. Now, beyond everything else, again, guys, they are planning on increasing energy costs so that you can, I guess, more quickly or efficiently spend energy and then finish your dailies quicker. And then in addition to this, they're also planning on lowering the required gear standards needed for PvE or PvP. They also tease that there's going to be a new Acolyte raid, which is another PvE mode. And overall, guys, the PvP content will be improved to be more fun and engaging. And as you've seen, or as was mentioned earlier with these smaller tournaments, they are adding real-time minor tournament systems, kind of similar to what you would expect from like a Clash from League of Legends or the Ethereum weekly tournament that you see on the weekends. Now, again, overall, these changes are very nice. They also plan on improving the story to avoid plot holes. And listen, although there wasn't an animation train, there wasn't a collab announcement, I will say that a lot of what we've seen from today's video or from today's announcement was huge. It was amazing. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot to love. And overall, guys, again, I do want to say that although maybe the content was not as spectacular or insane as you might have imagined, I do personally think that a lot of the quality of life changes that they made this time around actually make the game much more bearable, especially, and just for my own personal sanity, especially when it comes to the energy and being able to farm quicker. Now, again, if you're not someone that has a problem with that and you have all the time in the world to do your dailies, by all means, feel free to do so. But especially if you've played the game recently, they give us so much energy from so many random locations. And personally, I want to close my app, or I want to do some background battling, or I want to get to something else, and I don't want to have to just sit on my screen 24/7 with epicseven. And again, they've basically helped me do this. And honestly, when it comes to introducing the game to new players, I think this is kind of a step, or a fantastic step in the right direction, rather. Thank you again for watching, though, guys. I appreciate everyone who took the time to watch or sit through all this. I know it was kind of long. I apologize. I apologize also for the stuttering, but this was everything that was announced and teased in the new 7th anniversary. Thanks again for watching, though, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.